after the conclusion of this class on appeals and abatement, whatever the doubts are there, I'll clear it. Jhalak Satyam also had mentioned it to me. I'll clear the doubts. All right. Let's start with maintenance. Uh, Maintenance of wife, children, and parents. See, basically, your criminal procedure code, I told you, is not only confined to adjudication of guilt. It has certain other purposes, and some of those purposes are concerned with prevention of crime. But then you will ask me, why maintenance? See, it is generally felt that if a person does not have means of living, then he might resort to certain criminal tendencies, maybe for the fulfillment of his basic needs. That can also be one of the reasons why people resort to crime. So we would not want people to, go and take these extreme steps. Therefore, as a provision for social justice, we have this chapter 9, which provides for maintenance to be paid in certain cases. Now, maintenance here is paid to category of persons who are mentioned, and the purpose. Switch off your mics. It's a request to everyone to switch off their mics. The purpose is to prevent destitution. The purpose is to uphold the dignity of an individual. So the question arises, who can claim maintenance? There are 4 categories of person who are entitled to claim maintenance from any person. They have defined from, whom they can claim. So wife can claim maintenance. A wife kiski hai? Wife can claim maintenance only from husband. A lady is a wife, qua the husband, not qua others. So a wife can claim maintenance from her husband, provided she is unable to maintain herself. The provision here is inability to maintain herself. And it even includes a divorced woman who has not remarried. So if a divorced woman has not remarried, then also she is entitled to be paid maintenance under section 125 of Criminal Procedure Code. However, there are certain disentitlements, which if a woman commits, then she is not entitled to maintenance. First one is adultery. So if she is living in adultery, then her right of maintenance is compromised. Then she cannot claim maintenance. Secondly, if there is refusal to live with the husband, and this refusal is not justified, if it is without a sufficient reason. Now, what is the sufficient reason or not? That depends upon facts and circumstances of each case. In cases where the husband has married again, even though it is allowed as per the personal law, it has been held that this is a sufficient reason for the first wife to refuse to live with her husband. If, let's say, the personal law does not allow the second marriage, or the husband has not taken a second marriage, but he is keeping a mistress, then also the wife can refuse, because that causes mental stigma to her. So there can be n number of reasons, or where there is nothing called some second person in the relationship. There is no third person in the relationship, but between themselves the relation is so sour that it is very difficult for the wife to live. Either there is physical abuse or there is a mental abuse, then also she can refuse to live with her husband. But whether it was with sufficient cause or without sufficient cause, that the court will determine. Lastly, if both the husband and wife are living separately by mutual consent, then this section will not apply. Then she cannot claim maintenance under section 125. Reason is, if you have decided to live separately by consent, then while you were making that agreement, you should have taken into account your own position, that how will you maintain yourself. So therefore, maintenance is not payable if husband and wife are living separately by mutual consent. Now the question arises, what is the degree of this relationship which need to be proved? And can a presumption be drawn in favor of parties who have lived together as husband and wife? And what about the situation of live-in partners? In with respect to this question, the answer is that yes, section 125 applies to a wife and she should be legally married wife, but here the marriage need not be strictly proved. There is, in many cases, presumption of marriage. So long cohabitation gives rise to presumption of marriage. So there may be cases where husband and wife, where two parties, they have lived together as husband and wife, so that they are treated by society as husband and wife. They may not have performed the essential ceremonies. They may not have performed the marriage as per the personal law applicable to them. But if they are living as husband and wife, there is a presumption in their favor. And therefore, in such cases, on this prima facie evidence of cohabitation, the lady can claim maintenance under section 125 CRPC. This has been held in the case of Kamla versus M.R. Mohan Kumar. Prior to this, there have been many decisions of the Supreme Court starting from 2000 onwards, where they stress that section 125 need not be strictly interpreted. Strict proof of marriage is not required. It is a summary procedure. However, with respect to the interpretation of the term wife, though it has been decided in one of the cases in 2011, Chanmunia's case, this decision is still pending an adjudication before a larger bench of the Supreme Court. But as of now, the position is that the parties must have lived as husband and wife. However, if they have not lived as husband and wife, and let's suppose there is a scenario where a man is married legally to a particular lady and he also keeps a mistress, and that lady is now claiming compensation, or any other person secretly is keeping that, and society is not treating them as husband and wife, they know that it's an illegal relationship, then probably in that scenario, that lady will not be entitled to claim any maintenance under section 125. With respect to such kind of relations, they are not treated as live-in relationship. Even under the provisions of your Prevention of Domestic Violence Act, such people cannot claim any remedy there, because there what is defined as relationship in the nature of marriage, and Supreme Court has held that there should be capacity to marry. So where a person is already married, he does not have the capacity to marry, so that cannot be a relationship in the nature of marriage. So that is something that you have to keep in mind while deciding on live-in partner, that if both the parties are otherwise unmarried and they have been cohabiting together for a considerable period of time, then there is a presumption of marriage in their favor for the purposes of 125 CRPC. However, please look into the facts of this case. This is a case in which this lady, she cohabited with this man, M.R. Mohan, for 6 years. From 1998 to 2005, they were living together as husband and wife. And it was the argument of the lady that they have married secretly in the village temple. Not many people were invited. And out of this wedlock, 2 children were born. However, the husband, he later on developed a relationship with another colleague of his and then married in front of whole of his friends and family with the second lady in question. Now, immediately, as soon as she gets to know that, she has married someone else, she filed an application under 125. Now, question was whether she is the wife or not. The contention of the man was that she is not the wife. My wife is this another lady and not Mrs. Kamla. But Supreme Court rejected the contention and said that they were being treated as husband and wife by the people who were living in that area, and therefore she also has the right to claim maintenance. Any doubts still here? None. All right. Then with respect to wife, a peculiar problem came because certain personal laws, basically Muslim personal law, not certain personal law, Muslim personal law, had express provisions with respect to payment of maintenance. If you have read personal law of Muslims, you will find out that in Muslim marriage, there are two terms. One is called meher and another is called iddat, which have significance in a Muslim marriage. So what happens here is when a Muslim marriage is decided, the husband, he agrees to pay a sum of money as meher or dower to the wife, whether it is actually paid at the marriage or it can be a deferred meher. It can be paid at any stage. Then generally it is not paid at the time of marriage, it is only decided at the time of marriage. Then there is another concept called iddat. Now iddat is that whenever the relationship of husband and wife cease, either because of a divorce or because of the death of the husband, then the wife is obligated to maintain a period of 3 months as celibate. Now during this iddat period, she is entitled to claim maintenance from the husband. She is under the protection of the husband and husband has to pay her for her all her expenditure. But beyond the period of iddat, when the cessation of the marital relationship happens, then husband is free from all the obligations towards his wife. They are two concepts which are there in Muslim personal law. Now the question comes here, whether after the expiry of iddat period, is a Muslim husband entitled to pay his wife maintenance under section 125 CRPC. Now, on one hand is the contention that the definition of the term wife, which is defined here under section 125, includes a divorced woman also. So if she is divorced, she is entitled to claim maintenance. However, the contention on the behalf of the husbands is that relationship has ceased, and as per personal law, they are not under any obligation. And the second contention which is taken on behalf of the husbands is that they have already paid meher. So if money has been paid on divorce, then there is no other obligation under section 125. These were broad arguments which were made in a landmark case before the Indian Supreme Court in 1985. The case is Muhammad Ahmad Khan versus Shah Banu. The brief facts of this case are like this. Muhammad Ahmad Khan is a lawyer who has a good practice in Madhya Pradesh, and Shah Banu was his wife. They'd been married for 43 years, 5 children together, and now suddenly when they are very old, he divorces Shah Banu and chucks her out of the house. Now, he continues to pay her some 200 rupees, but that also stopped after 2 years. So therefore, now she has filed an application under 125 CRPC, which has been allowed by the courts, but he has challenged that payment before the Supreme Court and said that as per my personal law, I'm not even supposed to pay this sum of money. Supreme Court rejected the contention of Muhammad Ahmad Khan and held that 125 is a secular provision. It applies to all persons irrespective of their personal law. So merely because a person is Muslim, he cannot say that, section 125 will not apply to me. His second contention, okay, if 125 applies even to Muslim women, then payment of meher should be taken as a consideration. This contention was also rejected by the Supreme Court, and it was held that meher or dower is not a payment made in connection with the divorce. It is a payment in connection with the marriage. So it is not paid on divorce. It is actually a payment to be made upon the marriage. So that is of no consequence. Payment of dower will be of no consequence. It cannot indemnify the husband from an obligation under section 125 CRPC. And last contention which was taken was that, okay, even if I have a liability to to pay maintenance under 125, it will cease upon the expiry of iddat. Supreme Court rejected this contention and said divorced women is not limited to only iddat period. She continues to be your divorced woman even after the expiry of iddat period, and if other conditions are fulfilled, that is, she has not remarried and she's unable to maintain herself, then even after expiry of iddat period, she is entitled to apply under 125 CRPC. Post this judgment by a constitution bench of Supreme Court, a lot of political color was given to this judgment and appeasement policy started, due to which an act was passed in 1986, which was called as the Muslim Women Protection of Rights on Divorce Act, basically to nullify the judgment of Muhammad Ahmad Khan versus Shah Banu. In this case, there was a provision for fair and reasonable maintenance which was made. However, after iddat period, the obligation was that of the relatives who were to get the property of this woman and not of the husband. So you can look at section 3, section 4 and section 5 of the act. The judgment in Shah Banu case was told to be un-Islamic, against the basic tenets of Islamic jurisprudence. On the other hand, while these appeasement policies were going on, and Rajiv Gandhi government came out with this act, on the other hand, there were very many women activists who said that this act is anti-women. And ultimately, the constitutional validity of this act was challenged before the Supreme Court in the case of Daniel Latifi versus Union of India. Supreme Court did not strike down the act as unconstitutional. It upheld the right as constitutional, but said that despite this act, which is also benevolent in, because it is providing for fair and reasonable maintenance and not limiting it in any cases, it does not mean, the fact that this act has come in picture does not mean that it is in conflict with 125 of CRPC. In cases where this particular act conditions will not apply, the provisions of section 125 will continue to apply. And now the position after Daniel Latifi is, which has been held in so many cases, is that despite Muslim Women Act being on the statute book, the exclusion of section 125 has not happened. So Muslim women can claim maintenance, including interim maintenance, from their husbands under section 125 CRPC. Second point, who are the others who can claim who others can claim maintenance? Questions here? Just a second. Any questions here? Right to live with dignity comes under ambit of Article 21. Yes, Satyam, right to live with dignity comes under ambit of Article 21. Was it decided in Daniel Latifi case? Daniel Latifi did not. I will have to check on that, whether Daniel Latifi talked about dignity or not. But many cases from 1980s, they talked about 125 as one of the facets of right to live with dignity. I know of Savitri's case, which had expressly held that right to, so ma'am now, which had expressly said that right to claim maintenance under 125 is within the ambit of right to live with dignity. Archit Chakravarti has asked a question. So ma'am, now Muslim women can claim maintenance even after iddat period. Yes, Archit, Muslim women can claim maintenance even after the expiry of iddat period from their ex-husbands under section 125. Ronita Biswas, what happens in case of death of the husband? Are you talking, Ronita, about Muslim women or any husband? Ronita? Muslim women. See, 125 whether it is Muslim or Hindu or any other religion, this is talking about the personal liability of the husband, that one does not have the capacity to uh, maintain himself, whereas the other has the capacity to maintain. So death absolves the husband. The estate is not liable, because upon the death of the husband, his estate will devolve upon the children. Then in that case, what happens is a woman can claim compensation from the children, not from the husband. It is talking about personal liability for all the cases. I hope I'm clear with this. Uh, Ma'am, what was provided in the Act passed in 1986 about maintenance? Muslim personal law is a special law. It can override a general law. That is section 125. All right, good question. Akshita. Akshita, please refer to section 4 and 5 of the Act. The Act expressly, it did not say that nothing contained herein shall apply. It only said that if after the iddat period has expired, then the Muslim lady will claim compensation from those persons to whom on whom her estate will devolve as per as per inheritance law. And it was also provided that if those people on whom her estate was to devolve, they did not have the capacity enough to maintain that lady, then she can make an application to the Waqf board. Right? Please read Daniel Latifi's case. If there are doubts, I will explain this point again. But before I go into 1986 Act, you will have to first read Shah Bano and the Act and Daniel Latifi. Kumar Satyam has asked me a question. Muslim law is a special law. It can override general law, that is section 125. Satyam, here 125 came into picture after your Muslim law was already there. So even though it is a special law, the law which comes later in my, later in the period of time, that prevails over. And then 125 is a provision containing social justice. So laws which have provisions for social justice, they are given a purposive interpretation. So yes, 125 will override. And see, it is not in conflict. Your contention is that Muslim law is a special law. How can it override? Problem of overriding will come if there is a conflict between the special law and general law. As per the judgment in Shah Banu's case, 125 is not overruling the provisions of Muslim law. Please read that Shah Banu's judgment. They have, the two contentions were with respect to dower and with respect to iddat period. With respect to dower or meher, which is paid, it was held in that case that dower is not something which is paid in connection to divorce. Had the court held that dower is something which is paid in connection to the divorce, then it would have been overriding of the Muslim personal law. Then we would have come to your question and principles of construction. But it did not say in any way that we are overwriting Muslim personal law. They were only harmoniously constructing 125 along with the personal law. So they did not hold that the provisions of 125 are contrary there. I hope I am clear. And because of this reasoning, that 125 is not un-Islamic, it is not against the core tenets of Muslim personal law, has it been held in, even in Daniel Latifi, that despite the passing of this act, a woman is entitled to claim maintenance under 125. You can also refer to another case which has discussed Shah Bano as well as this case of Daniel Latifi. That is the case of Shabana Bano versus Imran Khan. It has discussed the application of both these cases. I have sent this case. Read this case, Shabana Bano versus Imran Khan. So 125 is a secular provision. Just see the ruling. The impugned orders are hereby set aside. It is held that even if a Muslim woman has been divorced, she would be entitled to claim maintenance from her husband under section 125 CRPC after the expiry of iddat period also, as long as she does not remarry. I hope I am able to make some point. Riddhi has asked me a question. What is iddat period? Iddat, as such, if you want to go into the legal definition, that is provided in this Act of 1986. If simultaneously you can Google, please download this act, not much, just 2 or 3 pages. Iddat is the time which a lady has to observe. Basically, it is 3 full lunar moon periods, or basically 3 months. So, or 3 menstrual courses. She needs to have 3 full menstrual courses. Now, why iddat period is provided in Muslim law is to ascertain that whether the lady is pregnant or not. Now, if the lady is, if she remains celibate within 3 months following divorce or death of the husband, then the paternity of the child who would be subsequently born becomes certain. Then he is related to the former spouse. That is why they have a provision for iddat period. But during the iddat period, the liability is that of the husband. The husband has to maintain. In fact, a divorce fructifies if they maintain this iddat period. Isiliye, even triple talaq has been held to be un-Islamic, because triple talaq mein kya hota hai? You do not wait for these 3 months. You say talaq, talaq, talaq abhi, immediately. So there is no provision for recalling your decision. But otherwise, the talaq according to Quran Sharif is that you say talaq today, then you wait for 3 months, and if during these 3 months there is sexual intercourse between the husband and the wife, then the talaq, which the word which was uttered, then that is considered as wiped off. So iddat is a cooling off period which is prescribed. Rama Priyadarshini has asked, ma'am, what if the lady become pregnant just before the divorce and her husband after divorce? Will her in-laws maintain her? Rama, this is a question of personal law, basically, maintaining of children. She then would be entitled to claim inheritance from her husband. You've asked about death. So I'm saying, no, this iddat period is intrinsically linked with other concepts of Muslim law. So in certain cases, if it is ascertained that the unborn child is related to the husband, then the child will get a share in the property. The lady, I am not sure because I have not fully read the inheritance laws, but I believe that lady will also get certain rights from the property of her husband. So that depends upon inheritance. Not sure about that question though. You will have to check with Muslim personal law. I'm not sure about that question. But iddat is something. So I'm not even sure that, if the husband has said a divorce and then he dies and iddat has not expired, whether the divorce is a valid divorce or not. It might be an invalid divorce. You will have to check with the personal law, or I'll check and get back to you. The divorce, otherwise, as per my knowledge, how I can remember is the divorce in Muslim law is appropriate divorce only after iddat has been performed. So only after iddat is complete, that these 3 months have expired, will the divorce fructify. So during that time, it is always avoidable. By sexual intercourse, it is already avoidable. So that's how the confusion is. Any other questions on Muslim law? All right. Then I'll continue with the applicability of section 125. The second category for applicability of section 125 is children, both legitimate as well as illegitimate children, provided that they are minor. So as long as there are minor children, as per the Majority Act. Majority Act has been amended in 1999, if I'm not wrong. And now, earlier it was called Indian Majority Act. Now it is simply Majority Act of 1875. And now any person who is less than 18 years of age is regarded as minor. So the liability here is both legitimate as well as illegitimate children. If it's a minor child and he or she has married, then the marriage is in no way stopping the right of the child to claim from the father. Marriage still entitles the child to claim from the father. It is only a married major daughter who cannot claim. But that we will talk when we separately talk about major children. Minor children in all cases can claim, whether legitimate or illegitimate, whether married or unmarried. However, now marriage of minor children has been highly depreciated, though it is not void. It is still not void, it is voidable. But now, if there is a child marriage that happens and if it is consummated, then that will be regarded as rape. In the case of Independent Thought versus Union of India 2017, with an aim to harmonize different laws and with an aim to curb child marriage, Supreme Court has said that instead of 16 in the exception to Section 375, it is 18 years. But nevertheless, if child marriages happen, then also the father has to maintain. A very interesting question comes in cases where mother and father are separated from each other. Then in those cases, the question arises where the custody has been given to the mother or where they are willfully living with the mother. Can they claim maintenance from their father? The answer is yes. Even if the children are in the custody of the mother, whether by the order of court or otherwise in normal course of events, they are still entitled to claim maintenance from their father. And father cannot impose conditions that I will pay only if they come and live with me. That condition cannot be imposed by the father. This has been held by a full bench of Punjab and Haryana High Court in 1976 in the case of Balbir Singh versus Hardeep Singh. Subsequently, this judgment of Punjab and Haryana High Court has been followed by almost all the other courts in India, almost all other high courts. Though there is no decision of the Supreme Court that I was able to find, but different high courts have followed on this line. Then thirdly, with respect to major children, they cannot claim in any condition from the parents. Particularly married daughter, she cannot claim from the father. However, the only exception is if there is a physical or mental abnormality or an injury due to which the child is physically or mentally abnormal and therefore unable to maintain himself or herself, then only the major children can claim from the father. However, if such child is a married daughter, then she will have to claim from her husband and not from father. She can claim from her father as long as she is minor, but as long as she, as soon as she marries, the right stops. And merely because the daughter, it's a daughter and she has not married, again she cannot claim merely because of her sex. No, only minor children, both son and daughter can claim only till minority, not on majority. On majority, age or marriage is not relevant, but only the fact of a disability that is relevant. Then lastly, under section 125, father or mother are also capable of claiming maintenance under this particular section. A question which has arisen is whether the liability under this section is even of the daughter or only of the son. Please keep in mind the opening words of section 125. The wording here is any person. So any person is liable to give maintenance to his father or mother. Supreme Court in the case of Vijaya Manohar Arbat versus Kashi Rao has held that the term any person would include both son and daughter. So maintenance can be claimed even from the daughter, including that of a married daughter. However, the married daughter should have sufficient income separately from the income of her husband. It is only from her personal income separately from the income of her husband that the parents can claim maintenance. It is no longer a moral obligation, it is also a legal obligation that has been held in this case of Vijaya Manohar Arbat. In this case, the lady in question was a doctor in Mumbai, and her father had claimed maintenance. She was a married daughter. So she had challenged this claim of maintenance, but Supreme Court did not agree and said that the wording used here is any person. Similar to this case, that the word is any person, it also applies that the children can claim maintenance not only from their father, but they can equally claim maintenance from their mother, provided the father does not have sufficient means. Though there is no decision, but this is gender neutral because the word used here is any person and not a male person or the word father as such. So they can claim from them. Another question which has arisen with respect to father or mother is whether it includes step father or stepmother. Interestingly, it has been held in one case. The name of the case, I'll just give it to you. I have attached that in reference. Though in that case, maintenance was not ordered to the mother. She was the stepmother who had claimed. The name is Kirti Kant D. Vadodria versus State of Gujarat. In that case, what had happened was there was this lady who had a stepson as well as her natural children. And she claimed maintenance from the stepson and not from her natural children. Supreme Court said that this was only an attempt to harass. However, they did rule in this case that step parent can claim maintenance under section 125 only if they do not have natural children of their own. So if they have natural children, then claim it from the natural children if they have means. If there are no natural children or natural children do not have means to support themselves, then only the stepson, then only from stepson or stepdaughter can you claim the maintenance amount. And it has been applied, this ratio of this case, Kirti Kandi Vadodria, has been applied by various high courts, and even stepmother and stepfather have been held to be entitled to maintenance money. With respect to adoptive parents, we don't have a problem because if you go to General Clause Act, it is defined that child includes even adoptive child. So adoptive mother and father would automatically come thereunder. Then you must remember that the claim for maintenance is not just that it is going to be a final claim. Even during the case it is going on, because it is a beneficial provision, the courts have held that there can be interim maintenance. Earlier, this was not provided expressly in the section, but in 1985, Supreme Court had ruled that though there was no express provision for interim maintenance, but being a beneficial provision, we feel that this power has to be read into the section. Now, after this decision, an amendment was made in 2001 and it has been expressly provided that interim maintenance can be claimed during the pendency of the proceedings. Also now, a time has been of the application under section 125 and the time is 60 days. The court in Savitri's case had noted, and even the parliamentary committee had noted that that long time is being taken to dispose of the applications under section 125, which is against the purpose of this particular section. So therefore, they recommended and amended the act, and now the time is 60 days from the date of service of notice. Then comes the question, from which date is the maintenance sum payable? The date of maintenance from which it becomes payable is the date of order, or the court in its discretion can even order maintenance from the date of application or from the date on which they have ordered interim maintenance. That can also be the dates, but they have to be expressly mentioned. If nothing is mentioned in the order, then it is payable from the date on which the order is passed. How will it be enforced? It will be enforced like a warrant for levying fine. And if the person still does not pay, then imprisonment for 1 month or till he pays. If it is sooner, can be imposed on that person for not complying with section 125. However, application has to be made within 1 year from the due date. So if default occurs today, he has been ordered by the court, then the application must be made within 1 year from today, not afterwards. Then the question arises whether the order of maintenance once made, whether it is absolute or whether it can be altered or cancelled. The answer is, if you have a look at the provisions, the order of maintenance once made is not absolute and depends upon circumstances. It can even be cancelled or varied or altered. Section 125 clause 5 basically provides the provisions where with respect to wife an order can be cancelled. 127 also are with respect to wife where an order can be cancelled. So I told you that a wife is entitled to maintenance as long as she remains chaste, as long as she does not marry. So if she starts living in adultery, or if there is a refusal to live with the husband, or if she remarries, then the maintenance order can be cancelled. This is provided under 125 clause 5. Now, after the judgment of the court in which adultery has been held to be unconstitutional, that is your Joseph Shine's judgment, the question can be with respect to the validity of section 125 clause 5. In that case, they had said that adultery is a moral choice and we cannot penalize, at least by criminal law. So if you cannot do it by criminal law, can you impose that as a condition under section 125 clause 5 has become an open question. But as of now, there is no decision of the Supreme Court on that. And therefore, till the Supreme Court decides, these are the conditions which entitle the magistrate to cancel maintenance. Kalyani, I'll answer your questions in a while. Let me complete it. All right. So this was with respect to cancellation of maintenance order. And yes, alteration also, keeping in mind that there is increase in the expenditure, the maintenance amount can be increased, or keeping in mind that the earning has decreased, the maintenance amount can be decreased, or the fact that the wife has started earning, any change in circumstance entitles to alter the maintenance order. That provision is there. A very interesting question arose in this case of Sanjeev Kapoor versus Chandana Kapoor, that whether revival of a maintenance application, that whether alteration of the maintenance application is against section 362 of CRPC. So whether there is a conflict between section 125 CRPC and 362. What does 362 say? That judgment of the court is final and it cannot be altered, except for arithmetical errors which are there, or calculation errors, or some clerical errors. In this case, what had happened was that there was a marriage between the appellant and the respondent. They had children out of the wedlock, but then it so happened that the relationship turned sour, and therefore the wife filed for maintenance for herself and on behalf of her minor children. In between, the husband also filed for divorce. Now, when the matter was pending before the family court, there was a settlement agreement wherein the husband said, okay, I will provide maintenance to my wife and children, including the arrears of the maintenance, provided she agrees to divorce me by a mutual consent. So she agreed. The husband also paid, but only for 4 months, and thereafter he stopped paying. And now, when he stops paying, the wife filed for execution application under section 125 clause 3 that husband has stopped paying. So warrant issue kiya jaye. The magistrate did not accept the execution petition and said that it was a conditional order and other conditions have not been fulfilled. So section 125 clause 3 cannot be entertained. She filed an application for recalling of the order, for the modification of the order passed under section 125, which was subsequently allowed. The husband has challenged that order by which the previous order was set aside, the conditional order was set aside, and he said that recalling is not maintainable because of 362. Supreme Court said that section 362 does not apply to 125, because section 362 starts with the word save as otherwise provided. So 125 is one of the exceptions to section 362, and because the section itself is of such nature that it requires change from time to time. 125 clause 5 requires, section 127 requires change in the order of maintenance from time to time. It has been held that magistrate does not become functus officio, and therefore he can, even after passing an order of maintenance, revise his orders if the occasion so arises. In this case, Supreme Court approved another decision of its in 1998, Mahua Biswas versus Swagata Biswas, in which it was held that the application of the wife for maintenance can be reactivated if there is non-fulfillment of the condition by the husband, so as to prevent fresh filing of maintenance proceedings. In that case, what had happened was, Mahua Biswas case, the husband and wife had certain dispute and she filed an application for maintenance. However, they reconciled, and though maintenance was ordered to the wife, they reconciled their dispute and started living together under one roof. However, the order was not set aside. As long as the order is not set aside, it is good in law. But subsequently, he started abusing his wife once again, and due to which she had to move out. So she filed an execution application that, this order is standing good on my behalf, and he's not paying me any sum of money. The High Court in that case said that she will have to file a fresh application for maintenance. Now that they have cohabited, she has cohabited with each other, she cannot claim on the previous maintenance application. But the Supreme Court said that if we go with this interpretation, then it would put the wives to a hardship, and it would give a tool to the husbands to defeat the right of the wife. Therefore, reactivation is possible because this order has not been set aside by the court. Had it been set aside by the court, had the husband went to the court and said, "Ki cancel this order because of this reason, because she is living with me," then the position would have been different. As long as it is not set aside for any reason, it continues to be good. And therefore, it was held that the maintenance order is reactivated. That was upheld in this case. Then the question arises, where does the application lie and what is the procedure in that application? The procedure is that where the respondent resides, that primarily has to be the place where this application has to be filed. Please remember that we do not use the word accused in case of section 125. It is not a criminal proceeding. Neglect is not a criminal offense. Okay, it's only a civil wrong, but here the remedy is provided under section 125. It's not a criminal offense. So 126 says that it is not the place of neglect, but it is the place where the person is residing from whom the maintenance is claimed, that the case has to be filed. Or it can be the place, in case of wife, where he and his wife last resided. So place of matrimonial home, or the place where his wife resides. So it can even be the wife's place. Three are provided. But in case of parents, because the condition of wife will not apply, so it has to be the place where the son or the daughter resides, that the application have to be made. And summary procedure is provided. However, all evidence which is taken under 125 has to be taken in the presence of the accused. The only exception is that where he willfully is neglecting and not coming for the hearing of the case, then the court can proceed ex parte and give an ex parte order. However, like civil cases, like Order 9 of CPC, here also there is a provision for setting aside ex parte order, but that application has to be made within 3 months. That's it for section 125. If there are questions, please ask me.